450,000.
Okay, in case you've had enough for this moment, we're going to break in for a moment. This felt so far to me like one of those awkward wedding speeches where the bride's father thinks he's funnier than he is and goes on way too long telling stories. I mean, I have been to countless White House Correspondents' dinners. I have worked for two presidents who have spoken at these dinners. And it's always stressful to come up with funny jokes, but here we are. Now, the backdrop, again, we've been talking about this, but the backdrop of tonight's speech was not just that this is a man who is at somewhere between 30 and 32 or 33% in recent polls for overall approval rating. It's a man who was spent his presidency attacking, threatening, and suing the very media organizations who are in the room as he is speaking tonight, which I think we all have to talk about and acknowledge. And as for the speech itself, and if you've been listening, you've heard from a lot of this, but just in case you're tuning in now or you're just trying to make sense of what's happening, he spent a good chunk of time talking about his favorite topic of all time, surprise, surprise, his job as an interior decorator, musing about the chandeliers in the palm room and new windows, everyone. We're in the middle of a war, but new windows and the chandelier. And of course, about his second favorite job as White House events coordinator, from the recent fight on the White House lawn. That was quite a horror show that we all saw, to plans for the future and his events he's planning in the future. He also talked in detail about the last Correspondents' dinner and threats on his life in gory detail at some point. He talked about the changes David Ellison might make, maybe joked about the name of the Correspondents' dinner being changed, joked about maybe a third term, which he said he was joking, but who knows? And also for a man who looked like he had very, very heavy eyelids for the majority of the night, and that is being very diplomatic. He felt like this was the moment to make an age joke about Joe Biden, of all people. So there is that, maybe not a big room reader. The closest thing he came to an actual joke was a riff about RFK's love of dead animals, and maybe a little bit in the beginning, but maybe there's more jokes to come. We're going to dip back in a moment, but first let's just get back to some of my friends here who are at this table who have been to a lot of these dinners, aren't holding back on their thoughts of it. Of course, Terry Moran and Eugene Daniels. Terry, you said something funny, which is there's always a tell with presidents, right?
There is.
And with Trump, there's one when he says, sir, and he's telling a story, right?
And they said to me, sir, and you know that what he will say next is not true. That is his signal. And they said, sir, and then you know whatever he says the guy said, the guy didn't say. That said, I think he's on his best behavior in some ways. You know, he's not ranting at the press. And once again, I think that's evidence, whatever his poll numbers, he's in charge. And I don't think he thinks he's going to lose power. He's going to, whatever happens in the midterms, he's going to attack the results if they don't go his way. And I think he's riding as high as he can. He's a megalomaniac now filled with authority, and he is making his mark on the country physically, legally, morally, in every way. There will be an age of Trump that will be remembered. I'm sure that's the way he thinks about it.
Well, see, I have a very opposite view on this. I think he feels quite weak inside and under threat because of his poll numbers and because he can read a poll and sees what's happening out in the country and knows that if there's a take back of even part of Congress, that there's going to be a lot of attention paid to his administration, and it's not going to be as easy for him to avoid scrutiny, and that's part of it. And yes, he will certainly do everything you said.
He'll attack the elections, and I think he's got a plan to prevent anyone taking
But that's
power.
a sign, I think, of feeling weak. Not feeling strong.
Possibly. So you think his niceness is insecurity?
Yeah, I think
he desperately wants to be liked. Donald Trump is not that complicated. For those who have read Regime Change by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, the best lesson I took as a reporter covering this world of Trump is that he is very simple in what he wants, and he wants desperately to be liked. In her first book, Confidence Man, I feel like Maggie Haberman's agent, but she talked about how he was always someone who wanted to be seen as a Manhattan person who was important and who was a mover and a shaker. So he knows the people in that room do have a kind of power, right? They do have a kind of influence. So he's constantly kind of auditioning to you. When you meet Donald Trump and you talk to him, he's selling himself to you, right? And that's why he makes the jokes. He is a little bit self-deprecating. And I think at the end of the day, he can be as self-deprecating as he wants. He can make as many jokes about Bobby Kennedy as he wants. At the end of the day, the reason it's not funny is because Donald Trump has kicked the Associated Press out of the pool. He has taken over the pool. They have subpoenaed journalists. They have knocked on their doors and taken things for doing their jobs. So he can act as if this is normal, right? He's gonna keep going, and he might be ranting about the press at this point, but he's ranting and raving, right? He is off topic, 8 minutes almost, talking about a ballroom that the White House Correspondents' Dinner will actually never be at, right? Has nothing to do with anything. Talking about the fact that folks are gonna be driving around down Pennsylvania Avenue and another one of these sporting events.
Part of his event planning.
Exactly. And so all of those things are making me feel like he just knows one thing, and it's rally speech. That's what I'm getting out of this, is a rally speech. He's not doing the thing that he is supposed to be doing. He isn't looking at the teleprompter right now, which tells me that he's also off script. I don't even have to hear what he's saying. And I think at the end of the day, Donald Trump can make as many jokes as he wants, but the thing that is not funny is what he's doing in attacking the free press.
It's interesting because it kind of feels, and one of our producers said this to me, it feels a little bit like he's got some jokes, and then in between he's sort of telling stories that he's told many times before, some with like kind of new edge to them. Let's talk about, and we'll dip back in, we'll watch it and see what's happening here. Let's talk about what could happen after. Let's say post-Trump, Trump will not be president forever. Do you think, what does that reset look like with the White House and government officials? You alluded to this a little bit earlier, and the press. I mean, hopefully you don't have a president who's obviously attacking them and issuing subpoenas all the time and suing them and threatening them. Let's put that aside. What does that look like in a healthy relationship? Because I think sometimes we forget that. Yeah,
I don't think we can go back to the Washington of the 1950s or even the Washington of the 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
He's changed it. He has changed Washington. He's changed the country. And so I think future presidents, both Republican and Democratic, will take some of the power that he got to trash the press, right? For a long time, there was a kind of understanding that the president was the president. There was a point at which you could go in reporting on him and in calling him out. You couldn't get personal with him. And Trump comes in that first term, and he's breaking all the norms, mostly, though, not with the power, but with his personality. And I'm sure he felt attacked. Well, now all of that it's all open field for Trump, for the presidents, and for the press. And the other thing is there's no such thing as the press anymore. So as candidates are doing every day, they're finding ways around the press that they don't like. They're finding the press that might help them and focusing on that. And that will create, a less reliable narrative out of Washington.
Well, everybody has become a content creator, right? Including candidates.
Yes.
Yeah, independent media as well, but including candidates themselves, which has massively changed how communications is done out of the White House, and I think it will certainly change future White Houses. Eugene, what about you? I mean, I think that the age-old days of like the White House Correspondents Association, put the dinner aside for a second, which I think there's lots of important debates about, but sending a letter, the sternly worded letter to the White House press secretary and demanding access to something, it's like those days are over. I mean, those weren't even taken that seriously when I was in the Biden administration. But what does that look like? And to Terry's point, I mean, the press has expanded massively. So it's like the association is a very different entity. And also it should change because it's all about communicating with the public. How does it change?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's morphing in a certain way. There are independent journalists who are good actors, right? People who are formerly at news organizations who are now, doing their own thing, like Terry here. There are people who maybe have a slant to what they're doing, so they're doing some more opinion journalist type things. That's all well and good, but there's also really bad actors. And I think that is the issue that we have here, right? Is like there's a whole ecosystem that is out there that wants to spread misinformation and disinformation. And that's the thing that I think we as the press, all of us, whoever it is, and how the American people see us, are going to have to figure out how to weed out that aspect of it. It's going to be really difficult because people can pick and choose where they want to go. I think at the end of the day, we have learned a lot of lessons, I hope, out of the second Trump presidency, which is, you know, as much as when you would say something from the podium, I always took it as Jen is saying what she knows to be true at the time, right? And then my job after that is to verify if someone told you all the information, right? That was part of the job. But now we can't, the trust but verify does not exist anymore with this administration and possibly with future administrations, because they are learning lessons and watching what blowback happens to presidents. What are the things that they can get away with when they are in the White House moving on, whether they be definitely Republican and possibly even Democrat. What are the ways in which I can do things and no one's going to care? And I think that aspect of it is something that the country is going to have to contend with, and it's going to be really difficult to do so.
But nothing stays the same, including the disruption. Time is a great healer, and I think we're going to have to rely on the fact that the world is made of facts. For example, in this war, they can't find a way out with their usual media and their friendly media, their subservient media. They can't find a way out with lies because it's very difficult to lie about what's happening in the Middle East, not just the deaths of Americans, but the huge shift in the power structure of the Middle East with the United States going down. Those are things you can't really argue with. So I've always thought that people will want to read the news that flatters their prejudices until they walk into a brick wall. And they're going to say, most of them are going to say, ouch.
Or they're watching all the money leave their accounts, right? We have a lot of great colleagues, Alex Tabbitt, Nnamdi, they're going out and talking to people at gas stations, showing them what Donald Trump is saying, and people who have voted for him 3 times who are saying, this is not okay. He needs to get his act together. He needs to focus. He promised us something, and he is not making good on that promise. So the politics are still there. And I think when people you cannot convince people, and the Biden administration found this out, you cannot convince people that what they're spending is not true. You can't will that away.